Welcome back to Virteva's Let's Talk podcast, the show that analyzes the newest technologies in Microsoft Cloud and how to manage those technologies to help your business be successful. It's episode 27. My name is Scott Ledwan, and we've got Holly Peterson back on the show again. Holly, welcome back. It's been a few months.
I know, it's been such a long time, and I was just thinking that Microsoft News is like, it's like dog years every time we get together. There's so much that's happened since our last podcast together.
Yeah, and ironically, what we're going to be talking about today is very similar to what we were talking about last time, I think back in October, about some of the Microsoft 365 Copilot changes. So excited to have you back on the show.
I know it feels like, we'll just get all caught up on all the different names that have gone through. We're going to be able to count them like tree rings now.
Before we begin, just wanted to give a huge shout out to our subscribers. The channel recently hit well over 2,000 subscribers at this point earlier this month. We released a new tech tip on Windows recall a couple of weeks back. And yeah, like I said a couple of moments ago, we are back for yet another Copilot focused podcast. At this point, do we just rename ourselves, Holly, to the Let's Talk Microsoft 365 Copilot podcast?
Super home premium. Yeah, I'm just when you think Microsoft isn't going to be Microsoft, they out Microsoft themselves. So, I mean, what did really, Scott, if both of us have been worked with Microsoft for decades now, what did we really expect?
They've never been really all that great at branding. And I think that as we start to talk about the first piece of news in the show today, I'll kind of break that down and we can kind of talk a little bit more about the branding strategy. So I pulled up an article here that was published by Microsoft. When was this published? It was published back on January 15th, 16th. So we're a couple of weeks old on the news here. We're recording this podcast at the very end of January. It's going to go up on the first Monday in February or the first Tuesday in February, whenever we can get it out. But yeah, Microsoft started this Copilot journey about 2 years ago now by introducing their relationship with OpenAI and how they were plugging it into Bing Chat. So Copilot came to Bing Chat, and then they somewhat shortly after that kind of came along and they renamed it. They said, well, now it's for businesses, it's Bing Chat Enterprise, and you get commercial data protection with it, which now is enterprise data protection. So again, another rebrand on a rebrand.
Yep.
Then they pivoted as we got more towards, I want to say like the summer or the fall, and they said, you know what? Let's just take the Bing name away from it. We're introducing this new thing called Microsoft 365 Copilot. It's a subscription service. It's going to be coming out in January of the following year. We're just going to call Bing Chat Copilot. And by the way, we're going to enable Copilot and this Bing Chat Enterprise piece for everybody. And you can opt out now, but if you don't want to opt out, everybody gets it. And at this point, essentially, it is turned on for everyone. So they go through, they rebrand it to Copilot, and then they decide, you know what, that's just not catchy enough for our investors. We're going to call it Biz Chat, but not BUS. We're going to call it BIZ Chat. And I don't think that really ever caught on all that much. So we are now hard pivoting back, and now we are at the article. They have rebranded Biz Chat back to Copilot Chat, but it's called Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat. And as part of the rebrand, they have also taken the Office 365 suite of products that they rebranded to Microsoft 365. And now they have rebranded Microsoft 365 to Microsoft 365 Copilot. So if you go to portal.office.com or however you get to kind of like your landing page or you use your Microsoft 365 app, you will now see that the icon, which changed from kind of like that orange O to the kind of like circular looking blue icon, it is now just the Copilot logo with the numbers 365 under it. Which, boy, I was reading about all this kind of after Ignite in December and early January, and you have so much stock in the name Office, and then you rebrand to Microsoft 365. And I get where they're going. They're trying to make it more web first. But now they've kind of really taken all the Office out of Office. And now we were talking about this before the show, is it really just feels like more forced adoption of the Copilot product. And
Yeah.
as we kind of continue the conversation too, well, let's talk about the Copilot chat piece first, and then we'll kind of talk about, you
Yeah.
know what, let's back up. So let's talk about, so we're talking about forced adoption. Um, they added a Copilot logo onto
Yep.
keyboards last year. That kind of just goes to show that they are all in on this Copilot strategy. They've
Yes.
renamed the Office suite to Microsoft 365
Yep.
Copilot with personal subscriptions in December. So if you just have like that $6.99, I think it was, license in the
Yep.
US for just the Office products and OneDrive
Yep.
storage, that changed in December for some different territories like Denmark, and I think Australia started to see some of these
Right.
changes. And then with this announcement, they also basically changed the name of Microsoft 365 Personal to Microsoft 365 Copilot. And they added Copilot to that and did not give you an easy way to opt out of it. And they increased your price by
Right.
$3 for
Yep.
personal customers. They have not done this in the business area yet. And we'll talk about that in a sec.
Yeah.
The only way that you could actually kind of get around it was you had to cancel your license. And when you went to cancel your license, then it went, whoa, 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 stop, please don't
Yeah.
leave. And then it offered you a classic Microsoft 365
Yes.
Office plan. So now I think that we've set the stage for what we can start talking about Copilot chat is Copilot chat, again, going back to all the different naming conventions of it, it's always been free if you want to use it.
Yes.
But what I think Microsoft has kind of seen over the past year or so is that, they just haven't probably been selling as many of these subscriptions as they want. So they want people to be able to dip their toe a little bit easier and
Right.
learn a little bit more about it. They kind of started that with these self-service opt-in plans where you could kind of like, you didn't need to get administrative approval. You could just, if you could find the right link
Yeah.
in the right section, you could just kind of go and you could get the subscription for it, which
Yep.
I mean, say what you will, that helps Microsoft sell licenses. But I think that if you're an administrator and you're actually trying to, control what's coming into the environment,
Right.
that's not so great.
Yeah.
Um, and now kind of the next step is they're introducing a new consumption-based model for
Hmm.
using Copilot. So
Yeah.
that's what this article is up on the screen. And again, I'll kind of scroll through it a little bit here.
Right.
Their ambition here is to really, and we're going to break down this chart in a moment, but I'll enlarge it, is they're trying to widen the gap on what is available in the free version versus what is available in the 365 version, which gives you the Office
Right.
app. So as you kind of look at the orange or the red triangles here, this shows you where those consumption pieces come in. So
Yep.
through Azure-based consumption, through the Power Platform, you can actually allow your users, if you want to, if they don't have a 365 Copilot subscription in your business, to actually use the agents in grounded work data. So this is Teams chats, meetings, documents, stuff like that that's made available.
Mhm.
And then you can also use agent, which is all the big rave right now. Chris and I talked about that on the last show. To You can, in your enterprise, you can go in and you can create an agent in Copilot Studio, and you could make that available to anybody in the organization through this new
Yep.
consumption-based model. So that's kind of the big push right now is, again, they're trying to get more people invested in this. We were talking
Right.
about, again, kind of before the show, is like, this is very much it's kind of like, if you've seen any of the new Avengers movies, this is that Thanos quote is, dread it, run from it, Copilot arrives all the same.
Yes. Yeah. I
There
mean,
is, yeah, go ahead.
I really, oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. I have spent a lot. I need to take a sip of water. You give your thoughts on this. I'm interested.
Yeah, so many people who listen and watch the show know that I work primarily in the end user communication and training space. And when we work on big projects, and again, historically, for over 10 years now, working on Microsoft 365 migrations, previously Office 365 migrations. There's a lot to Microsoft 365, including cloud storage, including, document co-authoring. And you know what? For a long time, those types of technologies in the enterprise world were not really well known and understood. And Microsoft really wanted people to use those tools. We saw the benefits from the consulting perspective, but I can't tell you how many times I would go into an environment and they would be like, we're moving our mailboxes, we're getting on board with Office 365 or Microsoft 365, but we're not ready to deal with SharePoint. We're not ready to deal with OneDrive. We don't have a plan for this stuff, and we don't know how to support it. Don't talk about it. And some customers would tie themselves in knots in order to not expose their end user base to those tools. And for better or for worse, Microsoft with this rebrand, you said it yourself, there is a Copilot key on keyboards. They're making it so that your end users are going to be exposed to this. And I'm not saying this in a fear way. This is a great tool. I think in some ways, Microsoft is saying, not only do we think this is okay to use, we want you to use it. And we're going to make it really hard for you to hide it from your end user base, to the point that the product, we're not even going to call it Microsoft 365 or Office. Not that we'll get rid of those colloquialisms, but we're going to call it Copilot.
Yeah.
We're going to make it so your end users are going to hear about this. And I see it as a really grassroots way of doing it. I think it's brilliant on their part, because end user demand for modern technologies is, I think, what has made Microsoft 365 so successful, because you and I can probably remember the days that OneDrive didn't exist. Co-authoring in Microsoft was not a thing, but people were using it in their consumer lives in the Google space, and they would come to work and be like, we need to be using this, or they would sneakily use it on their own in order to accomplish those things. And, Microsoft was kind of playing catch up for years. But now I think Microsoft is sort of, we're going to introduce this in the consumer, Office or Microsoft 365 subscriptions. We're going to do this hard line on branding. We're going to basically grassroots demand your organization, your enterprise, to either starting to use and recognize this tool, but not only that, is to start purchasing those higher level subscriptions. Like I said, from a from a partner standpoint, yes, it can be a little difficult, but I really do think it's a brilliant strategy on their part. So,
Yep.
Microsoft, if you're listening, good
Yeah.
job.
If it's everywhere and you can't get away from it, people are going to
You
ask questions.
can't.
How do I get it? How do I use it?
Exactly.
And let me walk back that comment too that I made earlier. So with the consumption-based model, it does not talk to your Teams chat, and it doesn't talk to your Outlook and stuff like that.
Right.
You can, however, upload files to it. And as I kind of pause the video there, you can design those agents, which are what these are over here. So when you're in that area, you could build your own agent, or Microsoft, I think, has built like 3 or 4 of them themselves. You can plug them in, and then you can use those to query. Now, depending on how you're sending messages and what you're asking, is the consumption changes on it. So if you're just sending a basic web-based question, it's like, I think it's like 1 message or something like that. Now, if you're actually trying to ground something, or you're uploading a document and then you're trying to ground it in your organization's data, or you're using some kind of graph calls, then it gets kind of quite a bit more expensive. And I'll include a link in the show notes to, again, the article where I believe that they actually kind of give some examples and call out what those costs are. But just, I wanted to make sure that I clarified that, because again, if you want that grounding in your chat and your emails and in your stream videos and transcripts, you do have to upgrade to the higher level subscription plan for that.
But I think that's really the big gateway, something in the end user adoption space that I've seen a lot. And this can be generational. I've talked about this recently with some of our customers that are sort of ready for Copilot. Is in some ways we're seeing that divide still of Is it okay to use generational or generative AI at work?
Yep.
Is it okay for me to do it? And it's, I think, from a, as technology partners, we tend to focus a lot on the security aspect
Mhm.
and rarely on some of the ethical aspects. But I see end users still struggling with that. When is it okay for me to use a tool like this? Is it cheating? And I think Microsoft is really trying to put it alongside those trusted applications. Is it okay to use Excel at work? Yes, of course.
Yep.
So why not be able to do a web query from Excel in Copilot? They're sort of saying, it's okay, you can do this. So I think that there's not only that kind of gateway into that license, to have grounding, to just go ahead and pay for it already. But I think that Microsoft is still getting through to people on that trust aspect, not
Yep.
just the security wise, but the ethics of using generative AI and sort of saying, it's okay. Let's serve it up to you in a bunch of different ways. Because you and I know, even if you don't have it grounded in your company data, it's still incredibly useful. And I'm
Yeah.
talking just about generative AI in general,
Yep.
not just Copilot. But I think this, like I said, I think I don't want to even say it's sneaky. I think it's just strategic. I think it's a great way for Microsoft to make it okay. But at the same time, the sneaky part for me is, and I don't disagree with it, is to make it so it is impossible for your end users to not know what this is.
Well, and I mean so we talk about them putting it on the keyboard and not everyone's going to have that new keyboard. We talk about that, there's Copilot icons showing up in places, but the
Yeah.
easiest way you can't escape from it is if you're using or you're operating within Microsoft 365 apps and you're used to seeing the old logo pop up and you're now seeing a Copilot logo, it's in your face every day. You're going to wonder what is that there. It's kind of forcing familiarity with the colors, the icon, the scheme, and where we were kind of in this is kind of where we'll stop on this topic for a moment is we started setting up with the personal subscription changes and the cost increase and how that was kind of just dropped on customers. And again, you're getting some tokens at a small increase
Right.
to your licenses, like $3. This is
Right.
the first time that they've increased the license cost on this in 10 plus
Get a
years.
taste.
You're getting a taste. I would not be surprised at all to see in the next few months, the next year, the next couple years, business premium and enterprise customers get the same small little price increase there on their licensing and get a little bit of a taste of Copilot, and then
Right.
perchance the ability to upgrade to the higher level license. Though, with and we're not going to go into this topic, I promise, Holly, but with the DeepSeek stuff that came out last week and how
Yeah,
stirred
I
up the
mean,
tech sector is right now, I would not be at all surprised to see prices are going to start to come down.
right. I mean, what makes for, that price drop is competition. And I
Yep.
think until it's early in that conversation, and I think
Yeah,
I
very
this too. You read my
speculation.
mind. I was like, I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to say anything about it. But it is interesting to see that we've now shifted a conversation from Microsoft buying like 3 Mile Island and starting it
Yep.
back up again to have the compute power to now a new player on the scene being like, we don't need that much processing power. Um, so I think it's the beginning of a shift.
For sure. And I think that it was inevitably someone was going to come along and make something a little bit better. I think that Chris and I talked about this on the last show is like you can if you are paying for the subscription model of like the OpenAI, like ChatGPT, you can actually have it look at stuff on your screen now. You can upload files into it and it can start to do some of the same stuff that Copilot can do. And with Apple Intelligence, if you own a Mac and you're using, I don't even think that it's necessarily limited to like pages or sheets on the Apple products. You can actually go into like WordPad, or I don't know what Apple calls their WordPad application, but you can actually have it rewrite things, I believe. And I don't think that Microsoft had put a stop to this yet. At least the last time I tested, they hadn't. Is you could actually right click stuff that you had in a Word window, even if you didn't have Copilot, and you could have Apple Intelligence rewrite it for you.
Right. Right.
So,
I think
as more of this stuff, it gets back to the conversation. Is generative AI in these apps, is it a product or is it a feature? And I think that I think it starts as a product and then it becomes a feature as it becomes easier to use and less
right.
consumption based on power and just overall resources. So I think that that's the
Yeah.
world that we're headed to, but I think that that's probably a couple of years away still.
Right. There's a just we still are early enough in the advent of it in the enterprise space that it is sort of this separate thing because again, so many companies, so many enterprise customers are still grappling with some of the use cases and risks. But I think about like cloud storage, that's table stakes at this point, right?
Yep.
Every product has its own cloud. And we've seen some, I don't want to say revolts against that. We've seen some backsliding into local storage, but I still think, cloud storage for the longest time, it was an add on. It wasn't a table stakes conversation. I
Yep.
think if we widen our conversation beyond Microsoft products, enterprise level platforms that leverage generative AI, I mean, every single one is trying to integrate generative AI that's grounded in whatever data you have stored on their platform, or at least supporting the platform. So I feel like Microsoft at the same time is trying not to be the group that lags behind. I think they want to lead in this space, and I mean,
They
for all the
certainly have
risks,
the lead in this space right now.
I'm
Like
all for
nobody
it.
else is doing this same thing quite yet. There's some
Yep.
similarities in what like ChatGPT is doing, but like they're out.
Yeah.
It comes back to the Teams bundling and the UK thing is like they do it because they're the only ones that can easily do it. And
Yeah.
some of the smaller players get choked out. So that again, that also comes back to, will regulation eventually set in and someone stop them from doing this? But
It's definitely been interesting times on that front to be be in this type of market where
yep,
Microsoft is a leader, right? For all their risk taking in the past, I will always see them as, they're a big ship, hard to turn, but I'm really excited that they're not wanting to fall behind here because I feel like there's always competitors in that space. And, smaller scaling companies can still decide whether they want to use Microsoft or a Google, kind of workspace. And I see Microsoft as, always wanting to compete at every level. So
yeah,
I'm
100%.
I'm just I'm I understand why a client would be a little upset that they can't tamp this down, but I'm, secretly kind of cheering them on. And a lot of that really comes from all of the years of working on projects where I'm not allowed to say SharePoint, I'm not allowed to say OneDrive,
Yep.
and I know how much that hurts the company from a security perspective, from an end user satisfaction perspective. So I really like that Microsoft is sort of like, we're going to make it so you can give the people what they want. And if you're going to try to hide it, we're going to make it so that you can try and plug every hole, but there's just some stuff that's like built into the foundation now that, happy to see them being a little more forceful.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, I think that strategically they have to, right? Like, because if you're not first, it becomes a lot more difficult to catch up to first place when you're in third or fourth or fifth. And I think
Ricky
that
Bobby.
Goo- Google, I think, is not super far behind them, but
Yeah,
the footprint that Google Workspace has over
right.
Microsoft is much different.
Right. And
Um,
it we really need, I think Microsoft is also revealing just how significant an investment it is, how much they really need this to be successful. But I'm equally rooting them on. I want it to be successful. I think at its core, I think Copilot, it truly, truly is a great platform integrated with Office. Forget about it. It's amazing. I absolutely adore it. I just want more organizations to kind of see the benefits versus
Mhm.
there's a lot of benefits. I feel like the conversation still focuses a lot on risk, and you and I might talk about that a little bit, but the benefits are huge.
Yep. So as we kind of get ready to kind of move into the tail end of the show here, I did have a quick presentation that Microsoft had put
Oh,
together that I
yes.
wanted to share. I think it just kind of makes it a little bit easier to understand it. Again, I'll share this in the show notes as well. And this is a slightly slimmed down version of the slideshow that they put together. But again, just kind of at the top of the screen, Copilot chat. Again, that's free to everybody, even businesses. Where the scope kind of changes on it is if you have the 365 license, you get the chat plus everything below it, which is the grounded in your data, access to Teams, Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, access to Copilot agents. The Copilot control system, don't let that fool you. It's just a rebranding of all the security and the permissions and the compliance pieces behind the scenes that we've talked about behind the scenes on the show again. And that's just data labeling, DLP policies, compliance settings. Like, again, not a whole lot different there. Copilot Analytics, this has been renamed a couple of times. It's been renamed again. This was kind of the Copilot Insights dashboard in Microsoft Viva, the Copilot's reports in the Microsoft Admin Center. Like, same general idea here, but they are expanding with analytics to give you a little bit more power behind the scenes, including the ability to actually query and create reports out of some of the data that comes out of the Copilot or the
Right.
Microsoft Graph API. That being said, I was talking to one of the consultants on our team earlier today, and the first comment he said when I mentioned this to him, Taylor, who's been on the show before, is, "Boy, that's great, but then you gotta fish through all the crap that comes through when you do those Graph API calls." So,
Yes.
there will be some additional work that comes with creating some custom reports, but,
Yep.
Microsoft said that they were improving the reporting in
Right.
July last year, and it was coming in August, and then it didn't show up in September. I know, Holly, you and
Right.
I were working on a project about it, and yeah, it never really kind of got there. I've checked
Hmm.
the roadmap. It's supposedly coming next month again, so
Yeah,
we'll
and
fingers crossed.
that's the analytics side of thing, so powerful. I feel like if they really want to tackle some of, again, that risk first conversation, the analytics side has to get buttoned up. I feel like it truly, what you can find out through Copilot Analytics, who's using it, how they're using it, and really all the reporting therein, that goes so far to helping some of these folks sleep at night, is to feel that transparency, that they can see what's going on in their environment. You and I have found previous iterations of it somewhat lacking. So again, this is my rooting for Microsoft podcast, but I really, really hope that that gets buttoned up, because it's it's going to progress the conversation for licensing, not just the free version, a lot quicker.
Yep. And I expanded this slide that we have up on the screen too. And this for our audio listeners is it's just kind of a look at a summary of the protections and IT controls that you get with Copilot Chat versus the full-on Microsoft 365 Copilot experience. And for the most part, it's very similar. Like, there's one line about 7, 8 lines down that talks about agent access and usage through metering, where it shows up in the Copilot Chat lane, but not in the M365 Copilot lane, which that's because with that license, it's included. So I don't know why they're calling out like a dissimilarity there. The things that you do lose out on if you don't have the full license is just with the chat is the lack of site governance tools, discovery, manageability, the ability to restrict site access to SharePoint through the advanced management functionality, which, by the way, SharePoint Advanced Management will be free to all organizations starting early next month. I was just on a call about this the other day. Microsoft has not quite figured out the way to make it free for anyone that has a Copilot license, and you only need one Copilot license for your entire organization. Previously, it was $3 per user per month, got exorbitantly expensive if you wanted the extra SAM capabilities. Now, starting in February, it's going to be free. However, they haven't figured out how to actually apply it to everyone. So, what their recommendation on this official Microsoft call was is you can go out there and you can start an elongated trial of SharePoint Advanced Management,
Okay.
and that would then apply to your entire organization. So that is still coming. It'll be, simple probably in 4 to 6
Mhm.
months because it'll just happen. But if you do want to start taking advantage of it, you can start taking advantage of it now just by enabling that license or that trial. The
Very
last two
cool.
things here worth talking about, and those are management and reporting capabilities. So obviously, if you don't have a Copilot for Microsoft 365 license, you're not going to get access to Copilot dashboard, and then you're not going to get access to those Copilot activity APIs. But that's really, I mean, the trade-off isn't that much. The data
Yeah,
security, the
truly.
permissions isn't going to affect you as much as if you're just using chat on a consumption based or agents on a consumption base,
Yep.
where you're really going to want to start applying DLP policies and data labels is when you're actually having it ground in your tenant data.
Right, exactly. And I think that's, you and I had kind of talked, I think it was last month, about some of the ability to, all of the like MPIP tools and things like that are going to get a little bit easier to control and use as well. Because I think those conversations go hand in hand with Copilot. Again, that risk first conversation, as soon as we talk about it being grounded in, people's data, both
Yep.
individual and at the SharePoint and shared level, protecting that data becomes important. And that can leave some of those licensing for Copilot conversations to die on the vine because it's like, oh my gosh, now we have to protect. We got to know what we have. That's a big conversation. I think Microsoft understands that in order to get to Copilot, you got to go through a few different gates, and security protection being a big one.
And
So
speaking
I'm
and
really
speaking of
happy
different
about that.
gates, next slide I have up here again for the audio listeners is there are a number of different places you have to go in order to touch the different IT admin access controls for Copilot agents. And
Mhm.
again, these are the ones that you build in Copilot Studio. So you have to go to Power Platform, not only to monitor the usage and how much data you're consuming off of them, but also you have to set up kind of that consumption-based billing, not only in the admin center, but also through Power Platform. The Microsoft 365 Admin Center is also getting its own Copilot that's also going to extend to Teams and Exchange admin centers as well. If you want the really fancy ones in Purview and Entra and Intune, unfortunately, you need a security Copilot license for that, which is a whole different topic. But again, I'm not going to go through every single one of these, but Copilot does plug in and interacts a little bit differently in some of these different admin areas. So you're going to want to kind of look at the slide that's on the screen or review it on your own time, but B, understand how Copilot operates in those areas and make sure that you're not only enabling your admins or your analysts to know how it works, but for yourself, if you're the business owner, you're the owner of the service, understanding what you can actually do with it in these different areas. And these capabilities seem to be expanding every month. Like it gets a little bit better every month as they receive feedback and go, oh yeah, that's a smart idea, we should add that. And then the last couple things I wanted to talk about on here was just kind of managing the agents. We talked about this briefly a moment ago, but again, you are going to, so especially if you turn off your self-servicing options for
Yep.
Copilot Studio. So if you go to copilotstudio.microsoft.com today, you'll just be granted with a big splash page that says, hey, would you like to start a trial? And anybody can click that button if they can get to the page and they can just start a
Yep.
trial. If you turn that off, you will have to go in and assign people a Copilot Studio access license so that they can play around with it. A couple of different options to set the access permissions on that are on the screen right now for our YouTube watchers. Again, I'll include in the show notes the link to that. And then the most important part, and again, this was what we talked about at the beginning of the show, is if you plan to use the consumption stuff, you do have to go and set up Azure-based consumption through your admin center. If you go to the Copilot section of the admin center, there'll be like 5 or 6 different links there. That top link, I believe, will send you right to the 2 places you need to go to enable it. And then based on how you set the pay as you go billing plan up for consumption, is you'll also be able to go into the Power Platform and actually get a visual of how consumption is being used, how fast you're eating up. There's 2 different ways that you can go pay as you go as well. Is you can literally go pay as you go, message by message, or you can buy consumption packs that start at, I think it's 25,000 messages. My recommendation would be you buy the 25,000 pack for the first month and you see how much you're eating up, and then add on. Or if you're not using enough and it's cheaper, instead of paying, I think it's $200 for the 25,000 pack right now. If you're not using 25,000, then maybe you can just shift over to pay as you go options, because you don't want to keep spending $200 a month to keep refilling that pack if
Yeah.
need be. The thing to remember though is whenever you're doing consumption-based billing, have somebody looking at it or have some sort of report set up that's telling you, so at the end of a month you don't just get a giant bill that you weren't
Yes.
expecting. Like someone should get, it's like security analysts. Like you can have all the security tools in the world, but if nobody's looking at those dashboards and understanding what's going on and actually taking action on them, what's the purpose of the dashboards, right? What's the, maybe not even the dashboards, what's the purpose of the security analysts if they're not using them to make their jobs easier? So just keep that in mind, because the
Agree.
consumption-based billing, I know I have a slide on this somewhere, but I don't think it's in this slide deck. Maybe it's coming up here. They do kind of outline, Jared Spataro outlines in the article, I believe, what the actual consumption of the messages would be. What's up there on the screen right now is just basically showing you kind of what the Power Platform consumption-based meter would look like. But yeah, just depending on the message you send, again, whether you're just sending a basic web prompt, you're grounding in your data, or you're actually doing like API calls against your graph, is starting at the low end, fairly cheap, a couple cents a message. As you go further and further up that chart, is it starts to turn into half a dollar, and you're not just, especially when doing the API calls, I believe it just counts as 50 messages. So it's not just one to one. Like it's going to increase based on the difference of how you're using it. So again, you're going to want to make sure that you keep an eye on that. And I'll have a link in the show notes that actually links to kind of the mathulator on how those numbers come to be across the different messages.
Right. And I think the pay-as-you-go model could be really helpful for, departments in an organization that have really limited use cases for the use of generative AI. And I apologize, my dog
I
is now
see. I see
running
that.
around in the backyard. I'm so sorry. But so I think about like HR versus marketing. Marketing could be doing a lot of generation, but not necessarily always grounded. Like we're making stuff up. We're writing text versus, HR might say, we want to analyze a bunch of resumes. We want to dig into the details. So I could see pay as you go also be a good way to, again, depending on the package that you buy, to really understand the breadth and depth of how these tools would be used. Because again, with a $30 SKU, you get the whole shebang kind of. Whereas with the pay as you go model, I think you could, read your meters and really understand the specific use cases. It also could sneakily be a way for organizations to limit usage in a strategic way, to say, we don't want you doing all, making 20 queries a day for whatever
Yep.
you want. We have this tool and here is the prescribed way to use it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, building your own agents, the agentic approach is definitely the way. Again, don't just build an agent that follows a workflow on the background. That's not
Yep.
truly an agent. That's just a workflow disguised as an agent. And I've seen that quite a bit, especially as I kind of like page through LinkedIn and I see all the different agent use cases. I was like, it's just calling a workflow. Like it's not
Yeah.
actually using pure generative AI to like have a conversation and feed you data. Like you're it seems like a waste of money at that point if that's just the
Right.
way that you're going to use it. So examining your use cases, sitting down, talking to different business units, understanding what their needs are, and then building an agent to meet that. That's the way to do it. That's actually what we're starting to do internally at Virteva with our professional services team is understanding the different ways our customers do things and then seeing how can we build an agent to supplement that and then going back, you go back to market and you try and sell things like that to
Right.
customers that have the need for it. All right. Last thing worth mentioning, and I think we mentioned this at the beginning of the show. So we talked a lot about agents and consumption in the 365 Copilot basis, the consumption side. You can also do this with SharePoint agents. So if you have a SharePoint site out there today, SharePoint agents is something that was announced again back with the Copilot Wave 2 announcement. But if you wanted to use a consumption-based SharePoint agent, you can do that as well. So you could just go to a SharePoint site, say you've got all your HR documents on one site, public facing, of course, that someone wants to go and say, they email HR 3 times a month and they say, hey, when's payday? Or hey, do we have Martin Luther King Day off or something like that? Well, instead, you could send them to your HR SharePoint site, enable the consumption-based model, put a Copilot icon on there, they click it and they say, show me the pay schedule for the year. Bam, pulls it right up. They don't have to click 5 folders deep and find it. So again, just another use case of generative AI, whether you're using a Microsoft 365 license at $30 per user per month, or you're using the consumption model on either a consumption pack or pay as you go.
Yeah, and I mean, extrapolate that to, more niche areas, then I think kind of the pay as you go model is just really, really key. Whereas, yeah, I think, for those of us who have worked help desk for, many years in our career, the questions that you can answer in your sleep, you know, farm those out. Do it now.
And for you entry level 1 help desks, folks, 30 years later, you'll still be working help desk in one way, shape, or form. No matter
Yeah,
where you
it
go, it's
never
customer
ends.
service. You're still going to get those technical
Never
questions.
ends.
Never
But
ends.
I do think it's really helpful, not only from that sort of departmental piece, but moment in time work. Obviously on the consulting professional services side, the benefit in there from a project perspective is huge. When we're making large scale changes in organizations, one of the number one resources I think we always bring to the table is, frequently asked questions. After you do so many of these projects, we know the questions people are going to ask. Why not take that model and kind of like blow it up a little bit more and get people the answers that they need in a quick and efficient way. I love it. I'm really all in. I'm so all in on this. Even at those times where I feel like the more obsolete it makes someone like me. But I always think, and this is sort of it's the automation model, you know, the more you are freed up, the more strategic you can become. So I don't ever feel like, the robots are just going to come for me. I just feel like I am going to be able to do the really challenging stuff, the really strategic work, the thinker stuff, and not always be dealing with the basics. So I
I
love it.
mean,
I love it.
when I was a delivery manager and I had somebody on my team come to me because there wasn't enough phone calls or enough work to do, and they said, "Hey, I don't have anything to do." My question will always be like, "What do you want to do?"
Exactly.
And they'd be like, "Oh, well, I could do this, this, or this." Obviously, in a work-related context. Otherwise, everyone would just be playing video games at their desk. Um, and they would turn around and be like, "Oh, okay," and then they would go work on that for a while, and it would keep them
Right.
busy. That's what generative AI, especially kind of, I think, at the middle layer, kind of where we're at right now, is going to do is it's going to free us up to some of that monotonous work, like creating like PowerPoint decks and creating
Yeah.
statements of work and stuff like that. It'll make those things go faster so that we can then realign our strategic goals and do higher level stuff, or maybe even help out in the trenches a little bit more than we do today.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that it really truly any repetitive tasks, because I think of myself as, and really I think any worker is, a certain percentage of your day is repetitive tasks. And maybe those tasks don't go away completely, but we can get them done much more quickly and efficiently so that we can focus on the strategic, the work that is not, can't be done by anyone else. And I'm just excited for more and more of the repetitive stuff to get done a lot more quickly, more efficiently, so that we can be focusing on, because think about how much more time a really high level resource can be, doing the high level work.
I mean,
That's really the
imagine
goal.
creating an IT help desk Copilot agent that no matter what you typed it, because you're having an IT problem, the first thing it did was just respond with, "Have you tried turning it off and on again?"
I mean, hey, it still holds true to this day.
It does. All right. Well, Holly, thank you again so much for joining. Awesome first show back for 2025. I was
Yeah.
actually talking with someone earlier today, and the words 2026 already came up, and we're only 31 days into the
Oh
year.
my
So it's
gosh.
wild how fast time moves. We will be back for another one of these towards the end of February, beginning of March. And we may even have another tech tip rollout in between as well. I'm trying to
Oh,
get a little bit better about trying to do one of those short form fact videos once a month or once every couple months. So thanks again for tuning in. And Holly, thank you again so much for being here. Really appreciate you making the time. If you
of
want to
course.
if you want to learn more about the recent Copilot changes, you can visit the links in the show notes, as always. If you have any questions or you need help with implementing or training around any of these Microsoft 365 modern work, security, or Copilot features, Virteva is a leading IT managed service and security provider, and we can help you with all of your IT needs. You can contact us by emailing us at letstalk@virteva.com or by visiting our website at www.virteva.com. And if you made it this far, as always, please remember, please like and subscribe to the videos for more. Thanks and take it easy.